Case 12. Mason Wien, of age 37, was charged with kidnapping 4 people who were found tied up in his living room. A tip was called in by neighbors. There are no details on the tip listed. Detective Padilla took the statement of the kidnapper Mason Wien in 2009 as follows. They told you I kidnapped them. Who told you that? The people I had in my house told you that? It's because they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they are doing to them. I was trying to get them away from the town. I was saving them. They take them. They've always taken them. I know. I'm from there. The town that nobody leaves. I left, and the pull to come back was too strong. I felt like I had left a part of my body behind, but I resisted for as long as I could. It was the longest anyone had ever resisted. But when I came back, I wasn't young like the people who come back are. I was almost 40. People always come back when they're in their mid-20s. I always knew there was something not right in the town. It was why I resisted for so long. It was so much clearer when I came back. The people had gone to school. They were different. They were like our parents. They acted happy, always smiling, always nice to each other. I hadn't talked to my parents in years. They were always trying to convince me to come back, pestering me. When I came, they were so glad to see me. They all were. My parents, my old friends, the town. No one fights in this town. You know, I was living in the city, and when I first moved there, I was so shocked when 2 men got in an altercation. I didn't know 2 adults could do that. We teenagers did it, but I thought you grew out of that. That's what it seemed like in the town. Excuse me, Miss Padilla, did you ask what town? Calico. It's in California. You've been there? Crazy town, right? Anyways, I was back in Calico, and it was like I never left. The adults were the same. I worked in carpentry, so I got a job in town. I was trying to get used to the town again. I was starting to like it. After a few months, my boss asked me if I had my turn in the farm yet. I thought that was weird. I had never done farm work before. I remembered when I was young, most of the adults would help out in the farm. I thought they did that because they wanted to. I didn't know it was required. I told him I hadn't worked in a farm, ever. He laughed and said he would put me down to work that weekend. I remember I panicked because I didn't know the first thing about working in a farm. My boss brushed it off, said it was easy, and they all start off not knowing. But you get the hang of things quick. I was going to tell him that I was not going to go. I did not come back to this town to be a farmhand. But then he mentioned the bonuses every adult gets for working there. The money was a good sum, not something I could say no to. And it wasn't like I would work there every weekend, only 1 weekend a month. I was convinced. I asked my parents after work what it was like to work in the farm. They used to do it back when I was a kid. They were too old for it now. They got weird when I asked them, said I wasn't ready yet, and they would talk to my boss to get me off the list. I didn't know why. I asked them if I should have some training in farm work first, and they said no, that they would teach me everything in the farm when I was ready. But for now, I shouldn't go until I had been in the town for at least half a year. I didn't know why that would matter. I was still planning on going because the money was good. But the next day, my boss said he had taken me off the list and that my parents were right. I had to wait. I tried to ask why, but they gave me excuses like they wanted to make sure I'll commit. I didn't know how being here for a few months would guarantee that I would stay and do the farm work. Carpentry was nothing like farm work, so it didn't matter how long I stayed in town. If I happened to go to the farm and hated it, I wouldn't go back. And it wouldn't matter if I had been in town for 5 days or 5 years, the result would be the same. But I didn't argue much. I was still making good money in carpentry, and I didn't need to do the farm work. I just wanted the extra cash. But if I needed to wait, I wasn't going to make much fuss. The months passed, and I was starting to wonder why it had taken so long to come back to Calico. It was great. Better than what I remembered. When I was a teenager, I just wanted to leave. I felt like this town was suffocating me. But now, it was the greatest place. I didn't have to worry about being robbed or having bad bosses and neighbors. I had even started to date a woman who was a couple years younger than me. Her name was Dina, and she was the sweetest thing, like all the women here. I never got mad anymore. I was happy all the time. I was starting to understand why everyone was always happy. It was this place. It was an Eden. I had been in Calico for over 8 months when my boss mentioned the farm again. No one had mentioned the farm in so many months I had almost forgotten about it. I didn't even know where it was. It couldn't be anywhere within town. I had never seen it. The farm had to be outside the town's limits. It made sense. The farm had to be huge if everyone from town pitched in to help. It had to be in an area that could support it. I immediately told them I could help out that weekend. It would do good to have extra cash now that I had a woman in my life. I told Dina, and she said she could change her turn on the farm so we could work together. I hadn't even thought of her helping out at the farm. She had never mentioned it before, and I assumed that maybe she had opted out of it. I was glad that she would come with me, though I was a bit embarrassed. I wasn't sure if I would be any good at it, and I didn't want her to see me suck. That weekend, we drove together to the farm. I still didn't know where it was. She picked me up and we drove for well over an hour. I thought it was odd that it was so far, but she told me it was the only place that could house a farm of that size. She stopped in front of a large fence, well over 30 feet. It wrapped around as far as I could see. I didn't know where it ended. The farm was gigantic. A guard was in the gate, and after she flashed him a badge, he let her inside. She told me that I would get a badge that weekend. I had never seen the guard before. I had thought that only people from Calico worked at the farm, and that was silly of me. Of course, other people worked at the farm. When we got out of the car, she led me to a small building. She said it was the training room. I would be there the first day, and the next day I would get my hands dirty and actually work at the farm. I was glad. I didn't know the training would be so formal. I thought they would throw me straight into the action. There were 3 other people in the training room with me along with the instructor. I didn't know the instructor. He didn't look familiar. He was tall, but I can't really remember his face or features now. They were so clear to me when I first saw him. I thought he had a memorable face. It was unusual, but I can't think of it anymore. I try really hard, and I can't. We were all expected at 6:30 in the morning to make the livestock breakfast, which they were to eat no later than 8 a.m. He went on to say that we had to stretch out their legs and arms and take them out for a walk by tying a body leash around them. They needed their steps in so that they could use their muscles. It was odd. I didn't know why we had to walk them with a leash. I think I asked the instructor why we couldn't just let them run around the farm. The instructor said our livestock was very particular. They had a special diet that needed to be given 4 times a day because they needed to be healthy. They started listing the type of food we would feed them: meats, vegetables, dairy, nuts, and breads. I didn't know what livestock ate that. I started thinking maybe the livestock wasn't cows, horses, or chickens. A sick thought came into my head, and I started thinking that maybe it was dogs. It would explain why we had to take them out for a walk by leash. Was this a dog meat factory? It would explain the high fences and secrecy. It was becoming clear to me that this wasn't a regular farm. I didn't know if I should stay or leave. In the end, I sat there, stunned. The instructor moved on from their diet to cleanliness, how we had to wash them at least 3 times a week and tidy up their rooms. He handed us each a folder that listed the rules we had to follow. We had to make sure to treat them in the gentlest way possible. We were not allowed to hurt them or do anything that might be deemed unkind. If we were to notice our livestock was ill, we had to report it immediately. The last of the rules on the packet was to never ask questions on anything outside of what was just explained. I didn't understand what that meant, but I figured I could ask my girlfriend after. On the drive back home, I asked her what sort of livestock we had. They still hadn't told us in the orientation, and it was really bothering me. I remember she laughed and said I would see tomorrow. I started getting the uncomfortable feeling in my stomach again and asked her if it was dogs or cats. She snorted and said, absolutely not. I felt relieved until I realized there were all sorts of illegal farming like bears or foxes. I listed them to her, but she kept assuring me that it was nothing like that. She told me our livestock lived a better life than we do. I was a bit confused by this, but dropped it. I trusted her, and if she had no problem with it, then I was sure it could not be something bad. The next day, we drove up together again. Only this time I went with her to a larger building instead of the training room. The farm had plenty of land, but there were no corrals, only endless dry grass. The building we went into was 4 stories high. There were about 5 identical buildings to it around the farm. It looked odd, not what I expected a farm to look like. But most of my knowledge came from movies and TV shows, so it was possible that this was a modern farm. The first room we entered looked like a large lobby with couches. People were scattered around them, sitting down, drinking coffee. I recognized some of the people from town and waved at them. We were a little early. Shift hadn't started yet, so we all relaxed. As soon as the clock showed 6:30, I followed the crowd into the industrial-sized kitchen. We started preparing meals for the day. It was pretty simple, but it wasn't what I expected livestock to eat. We made food like spaghetti, salads, and pancakes with fruits and veggies. I was thrown for a loop. I kept wondering what livestock we had that ate this type of food. I was assigned to the 3rd floor of the building. It contained 10 of our livestock, and I was in charge of all of them. I got a little nervous that I was going to be taking care of them by myself, but my girlfriend told me not to worry. The livestock mostly took care of themselves. We really didn't do much except walk them if that's what they wanted, but they would let me know. I remember I asked how I would know, but she just kept saying it would be obvious. I went to the 3rd floor, nervous as hell, but wanted the money this place would give me. The building looked kind of like a shady apartment building you sometimes find in the city. I've stayed at my fair share of them, and I couldn't help but see how it reminded me of it. I tried to shake the feeling away. I was given codes that would open each of the 10 doors. I had a cart with the food stacked on top of it. It smelled good, and all I had was coffee. I opened the first door and braced myself in case an animal tried to run out. Nothing ran out. It was quiet, and the inside of the apartment made me stop breathing. It didn't look like an animal pen. It looked like a bedroom. There was a bed. It was unmade. The floor was carpeted, a small dresser to the side, and a door inside the room. I could hear movement coming from the door, and then the handle turned, and out walked a man. He looked like he was in his mid-20s. He had a hazy look in his eyes, and they dropped down towards my cart. He said something like, "Good, the food's here." And I didn't know how to react. I was so in shock, I just handed him the food and closed the door. I thought I must be dreaming. I went to the next door, and again it was a bedroom. Someone was in bed sleeping. They stirred awake when I went in, and a girl popped up from under the sheets. She looked like she was in her late teens. What's worse, I recognized her. When I had first moved here, I reconnected with one of my high school friends, Ben, and he had a daughter who had left to the city a couple months before I had come. He mentioned it only once. I saw the family picture in his living room, but he didn't mention her again, and to be honest, I didn't ask. A lot of kids didn't keep in contact with their parents when they leave town. I hadn't. I knew it was her. She looked just like him. I think I asked her if she was Ben's daughter. She had a hazy look in her eyes, much like the man before. She didn't answer my question. Instead, she said, "Good, the food's here." I asked why she was here, what was going on, and she kept repeating, "Good, the food is here." On and on until I gave her a plate and she started eating. She didn't pay attention to me. I felt sick. I went to the other 8 doors. There were people of varying ages in each, and every one of them said, "Good, the food is here." They never even acknowledged me, just gave me a look that almost looked through me, as if they had a hard time seeing me. I didn't know what to do after that. Should I stay? I didn't want to. Not in this farm where the livestock seemed to be people. But I couldn't just leave. The people from my town were here. What if they decided that I couldn't go knowing the secret? I stayed, like a coward. I looked over the rule book and kept giving them food at the allocated times. The rules said I should check if they needed to take a walk by noon. I grabbed the leashes from the supply closet, feeling sick. They were human-sized. The rules said I should shake the leash in front of them to let them know I would take them out for a walk if they wanted it. I went into the rooms and it looked like they were doing normal things. I don't know how to explain it. The man in his mid-20s was sitting in a chair, staring at a wall and laughing. He kept pointing at it, then would incline his head to a spot next to him, like if he was talking to someone, and say, "That was funny, right? That's my favorite part." It looked like he thought he was watching TV. It disturbed me. I shook the leash and he turned towards me again. I had that odd feeling that he wasn't quite seeing me. He said, "No, Mom, I'm staying here today. Tomorrow I'll go back to school and I want to rest." I didn't know what to make of his statement, so I walked out. I did this to each room, and each time it looked like they thought they were doing things that they weren't. One person looked like they were crocheting the empty air in front of them. They looked at their empty hands and said, "That looks better." I didn't know what to make of them. Were they insane? Did the farm do this? Only 3 of them accepted the walk, but they didn't look like they knew I was taking them out for a walk. When they heard it jiggling in front of them, they turned and said things like, "Sure, I'll go to the mall," or "Sure, we can go to the grocery store," or stuff of this nature. I put them on the leash, and they stood perfectly still, conversing with imaginary people. As I took them outside for the walk, they kept talking to people who weren't there, having entire conversations. And I could tell that they legitimately thought they were at the mall or the store or wherever it was that they said when they accepted the walk. I felt sick when I ran into several of my coworkers and they had people on their leashes. They waved at me, smiling. I didn't know what to do. Smile back? I didn't want to do this. I wanted this day to be over so I could run the hell out of here. It wasn't until the end of the day that I saw my girlfriend. She was waiting for me by her car. I was shaking, and she gave me a hesitant smile. I smiled back, relieved that this horrible day was over. I didn't say anything as she drove. Halfway into our ride, she asked what I thought of the farm. I knew she didn't think the farm was a nightmare like I did. She had been working there for years, so she could not have the thoughts I had. I didn't trust her anymore. It was okay, I told her. I can still see the relief across her face, the way the tightness around her eyes had eased. She blew out a breath and told me she had been worried that it was too soon to bring me to the farm. She had thought that maybe I needed a bit more time before I was introduced to it. I asked her why she thought I would need more time. Did she think that I would disagree? And she said that it was not something most people thought was okay at first, but over time, you see it as for the best. I couldn't hold my tongue back and asked why this was for the best. I kept my voice calm. I didn't want to give away how disgusted I felt, how I was feeling scared of her. She told me that the people that have been chosen for the farm are the lucky ones. They get to be taken care of, and they serve a higher purpose. She didn't want to tell me what the higher purpose was, said that was something I should find out later down the line, not now. She didn't have to tell me. I saw the marks along their bodies, the unusual paleness to their skin, especially to the ones who were older. They were sickly, and no matter how much they were taking care of them, something was draining them. The weekends were only used to care for them, but the weekdays were when the livestock was... I don't know. When I still thought it was animals, the weekdays would have been to milk and to butcher and all those things we do to get food. Now that I knew they were humans, it would explain why they looked weak. Against my better judgment, I stayed in the town. I didn't want to attract suspicion that I did not approve of the farm. The good thing was that no one talked about what went on in the farm when we were outside of it. No one asked me anything, and it was a blessing. I didn't know if I would be able to keep the disgust out of my voice if they asked. I stopped seeing my girlfriend Dina. I didn't even want to see my parents. They were in on it. Everyone was. Remember the girl, Miss Padilla? The one I told you was my friend's daughter, and he said she had left, but she was actually at the farm? Miss Padilla, I did something I shouldn't have. It's why I am here. I went to visit my friend. I asked him about his daughter. He greeted me in a friendly way, and his eyes twitched when I mentioned her. He repeated what he had told me before. She went to the city. She'll be enrolling in college this fall. I gave him an odd look. He knew I was working at the farm just as he was. He should know that I know his daughter is there. I told him stupidly, I know where she is. I saw her. You don't have to lie to me. We both work there. I stopped after I uttered these words because his face, the harsh look his eyes made, I knew I had made a grave mistake. It wasn't that no one talked about the farm when they were outside of it. It was that you weren't supposed to talk about the farm when you were outside of it. I knew I had to leave that night. I packed up everything. I was almost ready to leave when I heard rapid knocking at my door. I was tempted not to answer, but when I looked through the peephole, it was Dina. She was by herself. I opened the door and she rushed inside, banging the door closed behind her. Dina's eyes looked wild. I have them, she told me. Dina was gripping the hair, almost pulling it out of her scalp. I tried to pull her arm away so she would not hurt herself. What's wrong? I asked her. Dina leaned into me, her head and mine touching, and she whispered, I can trust you, right? I know I can. I know you didn't agree with what you saw at the farm. I could see it in your face, and I'm glad. Finally, someone sees what a horrible place that is. I need your help. I needed someone's help to do what I just did. I have them. I broke out some of the people from the farm. Help me hide them. It's still too early in the night. We have to wait until everyone is asleep and we can escape. I didn't know if I could believe her, but her face, I could not see lies in it, only concern. I nodded. She pulled her car into my garage and we unloaded 4 people from it. One of them I recognized as a man in his mid-20s who was one of the people I had fed. I was worried, but Dina told me it was guaranteed that they would not find out until morning, and they would not dare search for them. The farm was illegal, and they would not want to draw attention. The people she had brought fell asleep quickly. We tied them up in case they tried to escape. They were still out of it, talking to people that weren't there, thinking that they were someplace else. They didn't even realize we were tying them. Some were smiling, happy in whatever place their mind told them they were in. Dina and I sat in my couch for a long time. A loud thump startled me and I realized I had fallen asleep. Dina wasn't next to me anymore, and the pounding in the door increased. I was afraid. I didn't make a sound. The door burst open and about 10 policemen came into my house. That's all I know, Miss Padilla. I just wanted to get away. I didn't even take those people. They were given to me, and I just wanted to help them. They looked so lost, so abused. I was a sucker, especially when a sweet face asked for my help. I thought I could tell when people lied, but that was just me deluding myself. End of statement. Calico, California. What is it with that town? This is the 3rd case Detective Padilla has surrounding the town or its inhabitants. I'll see if her notes show us some clarity. The notes Detective Padilla left behind are as follows. The parents of Mason Wian, along with his girlfriend Dina Rogue, gave a small statement to the police saying that Mason had been suffering a mental collapse that was becoming more and more obvious as the months went by. His parents state that their son had refused treatment and refused to go to a mental health facility. This statement is backed up by Dina Rogue, who stated much of the same. Mason's boss, Lenny Byers, also confirmed that he had been suffering from a mental collapse and had actually been told to go on medical leave until he felt fit to return to work. Lenny Byers denies any knowledge of the farm that Mason mentions. Mason's parents and girlfriend also deny any knowledge of the farm. They make it clear that they think the farm is a figment of Mason Wian's imagination. Further interviews conducted in the town also state that they noticed the strange, erratic behavior of Mason Wian and deny any knowledge of the farm. I was only able to get a quick word with the hostages, and they all stated that Mason Wian kidnapped them. They did not specify where and how, stating emotional distress. A lawyer conveniently came after and banned me from asking them any more questions. I do admit I can see what Mason means when he says that they look pale and weak, their gaze muddied, like if they can't quite concentrate on your face. The hostages' names were Ron Genny, Leslie Holt, Lisa Little, and Ruben Martin. I was surprised to see Ruben here. He didn't even seem to remember me. When did he come to Calico and why? How long after Beverly disappeared was he taken to? I doubt I'll be able to talk to the hostages again. The evidence against Mason Wian is astounding. The department won't need the testimonies of the hostages to commit him. And besides, it looks like he will be sent to a mental health clinic. There's nothing I can do to overturn this with so much evidence going against him. End of Detective Padilla's notes. Ruben Martin. Why does that name sound so familiar? Beverly is from the first case, and we are back in Calico. I need to tell Carol that Calico, California needs to be checked immediately. There are too many weird things going on. Wait, Ruben Martin. He gave one of the statements to Detective Padilla over the disappearance of Beverly Layton. Ruben, he was the one who was her classmate, the one she went out on a date with. The one who started hearing noises in his house after Beverly disappeared. Could this be the same person? I did a background check on the 4 hostages. There are no open missing person cases on them, but strangely enough, none of them have any taxes filed in the past 15 years. Also, no bank accounts, no job history. I have verified that Ruben Martin from this case is the same Ruben who gave the testimony when Beverly Layton disappeared in the first case I digitalized. He is the only one from the 4 hostages who isn't from Calico. It looks like he only did 1 more semester after Beverly disappeared, and then he did not re-enroll into college. He doesn't have any cell phone records and no cars registered under him. This is very odd. Ruben didn't want anything to do with Beverly. That's what I got from his statement. What could have changed? It can't be a coincidence that he was found in Calico. I'm going to need to discuss this with Carol immediately. End of Case 12.
Forgotten Creatures, a weekly horror podcast by Dark Nymph Productions. Available on all podcast providers. For more information, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Forgotten Creatures Podcast. Rate and subscribe to the podcast as this helps us grow. If you enjoyed this podcast, let us know and tell your friends.